All right, what's up? Going to be talking about good monsters for KPR today, tier list ranking of them. So to start off, you got Hellhound, of course. I think he's not the most important unit in Volcano Goddess because, of course, Jiraiya's up there, which I'll talk about in a second. But Hellhound is really what enables you to beat normal alongside with Jiraiya. Of course, you could probably use Mighty in normal, but Hellhound's also what enables you to beat hard, right? There's a lot of factors that allow you to get through Volcano Goddess, but Hellhound is probably the most important one other than your main DPS, right? Because again, effect is almost like around 50k% damage boost. I said 60k% in previous videos because I'm stupid, but I think it is around 50k%, and it's just overall really strong and really important for getting through the levels easily. All right, next up, you got your main DPS in this level, which would be Jiraiya. He does a ton of damage. He can do full map damage. He provides a slow. Overall, just very strong, and I think necessary for beating hard mode. Very, very important for beating normal mode. You can beat normal mode without him, but you're kind of just making it unnecessarily difficult for yourself if you do have him and you have access to normal mode with him. He just overall does a lot of damage, especially with his elemental advantage. Getting double buffs is usually the main strategy to be able to progress through Volcano Goddess with him, whether it is normal or it is hard. Again, yeah, Jiraiya, just great unit overall. And he's really the backbone of your set, not the backbone of your setup, but the main focus of your setup, right? You usually build your setups around Jiraiya, and Hellhound is really strong, but in the end, Hellhound is being used so that he can buff Jiraiya, right? Because Jiraiya will be, the star of your comp, the main damage. All right, but next up, you got an A tier. So S tier is basically what's necessary for the game mode, right? What's basically required to farm it well, farm it consistently, and farm it efficiently. This is what you need. A tier is what makes this process much easier, and it's also what makes this process, just overall a lot better for hard mode as well. I'd probably consider moving up Horus and Speedy to like maybe in between S and A tier, just because having double buffs on Jiraiya is so important, but I'll talk about it in a second. First off, we'll start with Anubis. This guy just really debuffs enemies a lot, very important for weakening them. Combos very nicely with Deathbite. I'll talk about that in a moment. But Anubis is just a very strong supporting unit, buffs your Jiraiya even more without having to be put on the same row as him. Very, very crucial for beating hard mode, and it can help a lot for beating normal mode. Next up, we got Horus. I'm going to talk about him and Speedy together, just because they are basically the same unit. You can just play two of them in one setup. Both really strong, nice speed boosts, right? Horus is usually going to be used on your Jiraiya, just again, 180% attack speed boost. Very important for maximizing Jiraiya damage. You want to get a balance of high damage, high attack speed, and of course Jiraiya has infinite range, so you don't really need to worry about that part. As well as the elemental damage bonus against fire units. Yeah, Horus is just going to be very important for, I feel, getting through normal and getting through hard, although you can probably replace him with Speedy if you are doing normal mode. Granted that Speedy is at 3 gold, but if you're attempting KPR, Speedy should be at 3 gold anyways. You should have all these units pretty much at level 500. Overall, this guy Speedy, basically required for beating hard mode, and they're I feel like also basically required for beating normal mode. Although you don't need to have both of them in normal mode, you can just have one and have it buff Jiraiya. Always good to have two though, you can't really go wrong with that. As I said before, Horus buffs the DPS because he attacks himself. Speedy can go in mid row, back row, just buff your utility units, stunning units, all that type of stuff. Next up, Evo Archimedes. The reason he's so high up here is because number one, he can be used as a replacement carry for Jiraiya in normal mode. He does a good bit of damage, I think comparable to that of a Felina when he does ult, or when she does ult. Again, ice damage counter, and also even if the damage is not the main focus for Archimedes, she does provide 2-second freeze on the whole map. Can't really go wrong with that, and really can't go wrong with that when you're doing bonus ice damage in such high numbers, right? So Archimedes is just going to be a very solid unit. I wouldn't say necessary for defeating hard mode and normal mode, but considering, how much the evolution helps and its potential to carry in normal mode, being the only sort of viable carry in normal mode other than Jiraiya, I think she belongs up here in A tier. Next up, Deathbite. Deathbite's up here mainly for two reasons, right? Number one, combos really nicely with Anubis to one-shot anything, right? Because, again, Anubis applies a damage taken buff to enemies, and Deathbite really just takes advantage of that, ends up doing, much over 100% of the target's health with one use of its ability, right? second purpose is because, you know, Deathbite does really become useful in the later waves, especially against the you know, the rock breakers and the boss. Can cut down a lot of HP even if you don't have the Anubis buff. Deathbite overall just great unit for reducing HP. You know, you get a lot of value, especially for Deathbite being a cheaper unit, right? Ability's still really strong, just sort of like Devin but better, I'd say. Because his ability does hit multiple targets, right? It's going to be a lot more consistent than Devin's ability. It's going to be really strong. I'd say, yeah, necessary for beating hard mode. And, you know, you get this guy from JR Hard anyways. Why not use him in normal mode? He'll help a lot in normal mode. You honestly don't need to upgrade him. His only purpose is just to cut down enemy HP by 50% anyways, or one shot with Anubis. Moving on to Speedy, I feel like I've talked about it enough with Horus, but, you know, just again, nice speed boost. Usually going to be using on utility units, stuff like Devin, stuff like Anubis, stuff like Archimedes, you know, maybe Slime King, maybe Blue Archangel, maybe Zeus. All these sort of stuff that are not going to be your main damage, but that still really benefit from a speed boost because their abilities are just really strong. Yeah, just solid tower overall. Can't go wrong with them. All right, next up in B tier, I'd say these guys are not really necessary for completing levels, but they do help a lot, and can really make your farming significantly more efficient and streamlined. So you got Susanoo here. So the reason Susanoo is in B tier is because, you know, very good for automated farming, right? Because let's say you do want to leave let's say you do want to play like Volcano Goddess with an auto clicker, and normally you need to use rock summons, right? But now you just have Susanoo, summons all your rocks for you, makes farming a lot easier, and also specifically very strong in Volcano Goddess because of the focus on rocks, I'd say. Actually, no, that's you know, I don't think it's fair to say that. There is a lot of rock breakers and all the elemental challenges too, but yeah, just great for AFK farming, making the farming process a lot easier, saving you a lot of gems. That's why he's in B tier. Not necessary to complete the levels, of course, because you can choose to just do a bunch of gem rock summons, but not really that much reason to not use Susanoo if you have her, because have him, her, it, no idea. Yeah, just have Susanoo, might as well use the unit. Pretty good. Saves you the gems, lets you AFK. Zeus. So Zeus is, although Zeus does less damage against the fire units, right? He does still provide a really good stun. I believe his stun is the closest thing to a permastall right now. Talked about that in a previous video. I'll link that down below, what permastalling is, yada yada. Zeus overall just really nice unit. Reason why he's not up here in A tier and S tier is, again, I see him being swapped out with other units pretty frequently. He's usually your 7th, 8th, or 9th unit. Not going to be a top priority in your comps, but he's really good to have around. You know, really solid stun. That's pretty much his main purpose, I'd say, considering that he does do, you know, very weakened damage against the fire units. And of course, you know, he can be replaced with other units. Yeah, I think B tier is pretty fair. You know, none of these two units are not bad. They're not necessary to complete the levels though. They just, you know, help a bit if you do have them in. All right, next up, C tier. I'd say these guys are usually going to be your 8th or 9th unit, or sort of like a replacement unit for other units. You know, still, I guess, all right to have in your setup. You know, they can be used as replacements if you have a little bit more limited access to units, or, you know, specifically Blue Archangel is just going to be used in less setups, but still pretty strong. So yeah, Archimedes, nice full map, 2-second stun. Yeah, can't go wrong with her. Same sort of deal with Slime King, 2-second full map stun. Damage on these two are not really going to matter at all. Even though Archimedes does do bonus damage, you know, pre-evolution, especially when her ability doesn't do damage, it's really not that significant. So I wouldn't say regular Archimedes is really a good source of damage. You just kind of have her and Slime King as stuns, which are, you know, all around solid. Global stuns have gotten a lot better over time, especially because you can just keep them in the back line, and they'll still be serving pretty good purpose. All right, next up, Mighty. Mighty is gonna be sort of the poor man's option to Hellhound. So if you want to beat normal using, you know, Jiraiya carry with Speedy, you don't have, or Speedy or Horus, you know, you don't have Hellhound, just use Mighty instead. You'll be able to get through normal. You'll be able to get through normal pretty easily on Wednesdays. I'm not sure how he does on non-Wednesdays without the damage buff. But yeah, Mighty is just, you know, your replacement option for Hellhound if you don't have him. You know, if you don't have Hellhound, Mighty is going to be really important to buff Jiraiya. Otherwise, you know, Mighty, not so important. Just use Hellhound. Way better. And I also find that Mighty, you know, when you do have Hellhound, it's not like the Horus Speedy situation where you're using both of them. You usually just use Hellhound, because, you know, as the meta stands right now, a main DPS is pretty much all you need, along with a bunch of supporting units. You know, you don't really build up two main DPS sources. You know, even when you are using Evo Archimedes, I'd say it's less common to see her being used with Speedy Mighty, while Jiraiya is being used with, you know, Horus Hellhound. You usually just see her being used with Speedy, as, you know, a utility unit that can help with some damage, right? All right, next up, Blue Archangel. Talked about it a little before. Gonna be pretty good stun overall, you know, solid stun, not a full map stun, does do a little bit bonus ice damage, not too significant either. Yeah, reason not in D tier is in C tier. I find that Blue Archangel can be used as a replacement for Zeus sometimes, and also in some really strong setups, yeah, you use Blue Archangel in them. Not used, you know, as frequently as Zeus, but they do both generally serve the same purpose, which is a nice solid stun, you know, DPS not too significant, stun, pretty good. Alright, D tier. So these guys are usually going to be your, probably I'd say your 9th units. Not ideal to use them, but they're not bad to use either, right? You know, it's not ideal to be using them, but I guess, you know, with some setups, it's good to have them. Not the best, I'd say, but you can still use them, and they're still decent options. You got Evolve Frostbite, Evolve Chili. You know, both have sort of the same purpose. Do a little bit of bonus damage to finish off smaller enemies. Also, both, you know, not bad stuns. I wouldn't recommend using the non-evolved versions, because, you know, then they can't even serve the purpose of just finishing off 1 or 2 enemies with whatever little damage they have. Next up, Devin. Pretty much just worse Death Bite. Sometimes I'd use Devin, you know, along with Death Bite. And that's sort of the only situation where you do use Devin. I've only seen it in one Volcano Goddess setup, where you just have, you know, 2 units that can take advantage of the Anubis debuff and, you know, try to go for enemy one-shots. But Devin is used very, very infrequently. Yeah, very infrequently. Usually it's just Death Bite's way better to be used with Anubis, but he can be a consideration, I guess, as a 9th unit, just to contribute a little bit more to your team comp. Alongside, you know, with Anubis to go for those one-shots, or even without Anubis, you know, 90% HP drain, going to be really good as well, provided that, you know, it does hit an enemy that has a significant amount of HP. You know, you basically win the lottery if Devin ends up targeting a boss. Otherwise, you know, 9th unit. All right, next up, Poseidon. I'd say pretty good in some quote-unquote budget comps. You know, he is still a mythical. I guess if you don't have Jiraiya, you know, Poseidon can be pretty alright. You know, 3 gold stars, better than Mighty in terms of buffing your ice units, so buffing something like an Archimedes. But if you have this guy at 3 gold stars, you're probably more than set to beat this level anyways, considering how time-consuming it is to get 3 gold stars. But I guess he can be decent damage, decent buff. Yeah, again, he doesn't really provide a significant use, which is a common theme with all the D tier monsters. That's why they're all the way down here. That's why they're usually your 9th unit pick. Alright, Amaterasu. Just nice secondary damage contributor, I'd say. I think she has the best flat DPS in the entire game, which is why she's going to be here as sort of like the only secondary flat damage dealer. Again, nothing really significant about her. Just, you know, use her as your 8th or 9th unit if you don't really have anything else good to put in. You just want a nice flat damage contributor. Not going to help too much, not going to hinder you too much. Yeah, overall not so bad. And then pretty much all the other units here are you don't really want to use them in Volcano Goddess. Again, what's a running theme with all the elemental challenges is that you need very specific setups, and as you see on this list here, you need quite a few mythics for your setups to work, and especially for them to work efficiently. So I wouldn't really recommend using anything else. If you have to use anything else, you know, maybe doing this challenge is not the best decision at the moment, and you know, maybe just grab your normal complete and leave like I did until you are able to get better units and start going for efficient farming. Again, something else with this list, all the levels on here really don't matter. I'd say it's expected to have them all at 500, but of course some utility units you don't need at 500, you know, stuff like the Egyptians, stuff like, you know, Archimedes unevolved, stuff like, you know, Susanoo, Death by, you know, the main levels are gonna be Jiraiya and then your frontliners, but you know, levels still really do help a lot. And I definitely recommend that you go for, you know, at least level 400 or 500 on most of your setup before attempting this challenge. That's gonna be it for this video. Like, subscribe, try to do more content, I guess, geared towards elemental challenges, seeing as that is the end game for now. Yeah, it's gonna be it. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.